Moderna asking US European regulator to locate the virus shots. Moderna Inc. said it would ask US and European regulators Monday to allow emergency use of its COVID-19 vaccine as new study results confirm the sort of strong protection, ramping up the risk to begin limited vaccinations as the coronavirus rampage worsens. Multiple vaccines candidates must succeed for the world to stamp out the pandemic, which has been on the upswing in the US and Europe. US hospitals have been stretched to the limit as the nation has seen more than 160,000 new cases per day and more than 1,400 daily deaths. Since first emerging nearly a year ago in China, the virus has killed more than 1.4 million people worldwide. Moderna is one of the severe companies to have already submitted partial data to a rolling review process offered by Health Canada rather than presenting regulators with a complete package of trial results. The would-be vaccine makers file data and findings as they become available. Canada has been looking at Moderna's first results since mid-October. Canada has a different approval process than the United States and the European countries, meaning that Moderna and Pfizer do not have to apply or reapply at each step. Instead, they have to submit their newest data and findings. Moderna created its shots with the U.S. National Institutes of Health and already had a hint they were working, but said it got the final needed results over the weekend that suggest the vaccine is more than 94% effective. Of 196 COVID-19 cases so far in its huge U.S. study, 185 were trial participants who received the placebo and 11 who got the real vaccine. The only people who got severely ill, 30%, including one who died, had received the dummy shots, said Dr. Tel Zaks, the Cambridge, Massachusetts company's chief medical official. When he learned the result, I allowed myself to cry for the first time, Jacks told the Associated Press. We have already, just in the trial, have already saved lives. Just imagine the impact, then multiply it to the people who can get this vaccine. Moderna said the shot's effectiveness and a good safety record so far with only temporary flu-like side effects mean they meet requirements set by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration for emergency use. Before the final stage testing is complete, the European Medicines Agency, Europe's version of FDA, has signaled it also is open to faster emergency clearance. What comes next? The FDA has pledged that before it decides to roll out any COVID-19 vaccines, its scientific advisors will publicly debate whether there is enough evidence behind each candidate. First up on December 10, Pfizer and BioNTech will present data suggesting their vaccine candidate is 95% effective. Moderna said its turn at this science court is expected exactly a week later on December 17th. Rationing initial doses. If the FDA allows emergency use, Moderna expects to have 20 million doses ready for the US by year's end. Recipients will need 2 doses, so that's enough for 10 million people. Pfizer expects to have 15 million doses globally in December. Half of them are enough for 12.5 million people. are earmarked for the U.S. This week, a different panel of U.S. experts established by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will meet to decide how initial supplies will be given out. They are expected to reserve scarce first doses for health care workers, and if the shots work well enough in the frail elderly, for residents of long-term care facilities. As more vaccines gradually become available in coming months, other essential workers and people at highest risk from the coronavirus would get in line, but enough for the general population isn't expected until at least the spring. Outside the US, Jacques said significant supplies from Moderna would be available later in the first quarter of next year. Obviously, we are doing everything in our power to increase the capacity and accelerate the timelines. Both Moderna's and Pfizer's vaccines are made with the same technology, using a piece of genetic code for the spike protein that stirs the virus. That messenger's RNA or mRNA instructs the body to make some harmless spike protein, training immune cells to recognize it if the real virus eventually comes along. AstraZeneca is in confusion. AstraZeneca last week announced the confusing early results of its vaccine candidate for research in Britain and Brazil. That vaccine appears 62% effective when tested as originally intended, with recipients given 2 full doses, but because of a manufacturing error, a small number of volunteers got a lower first dose, and AstraZeneca said in that group the vaccine appeared to be 90% effective. Experts say it's unclear why the lower dose approach would work better and that it may just be a statistical quirk. A larger U.S. study of the AstraZeneca candidate still is underway that should eventually give the FDA a better picture of how well it works. The FDA has said any COVID-19 vaccine would have to be at least 50% effective. Meanwhile, Britain's government will have to decide whether its UK data is sufficient for an early rollout there. Still in the pipeline, Johnson & Johnson also is in final stage testing in the US and several other countries to see if its vaccine candidates could work with just one dose. Both the J&J and the AstraZeneca vaccines work by using harmless cold viruses to carry the spike protein gene into the body and prime the immune system. The different technologies have ramifications for how easily different vaccines could be distributed globally. The AstraZeneca shots won't require Pfizer storage like the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. Candidates made with still other technologies are in late-stage testing too. Another U.S. company, Novavax Inc. announced Monday that it has finished enrolling 15,000 people in a late-stage study in Britain and plans to begin recruiting even more volunteers for final testing in the US and Mexico in the coming weeks. Vaccines made by 3 Chinese companies and a Russian candidate also are being tested in thousands of people in countries around the world.